For years I've been meaning to get around to installing an electric overhead hoist in my garage, and I'm finally doing it. I process a lot of deer during hunting season, and there's nothing quite as convenient as an electric winch to lift a full deer carcass up to the perfect working level. I don't need anything extremely heavy duty, since deer around these parts only tend to weigh up to about 150 pounds or so, maybe as much as 200 pounds, but usually not. So I ended up buying this hoist system from a brand called VivoHome. It cost about $125 and is rated pretty highly on Amazon. This hoist is rated for 220 pounds straight up, though that capacity can be doubled to 440 pounds if using the extra pulley and looping the cable. Because as we all learned in physics class, when you incorporate pulleys into the mix, you compound the effective force behind whatever you're pulling. But anyway, for now, I don't really need to worry about that, since 220 pounds is plenty for my usual needs. The installation of this thing is pretty straightforward in concept. Use these two U-shaped brackets to go around some sort of beam in the ceiling and bolt them to the winch housing. But because my garage roof isn't built out of steel beams of this particular size, and these brackets are too small to fit around the 2x4s that the roof is made of, I have to build some sort of bracket. Now, I also want to mount this hoist pretty high up and out of the way in the framework of my garage roof. So I pretty much need to construct some sort of mounting surface that attaches between the angled part of two of the roof trusses. For that, I just need a couple lengths of 2x4, and one of these pieces of heavy-duty strut. These are used for all sorts of things, and you can buy them in long 10-foot lengths and cut them to size, but Lowe's also sells them in these 2-foot lengths, which is great because that means I don't have to cut this thick, heavy metal at all. The first thing I'll do is attach the 2x4s together in a perpendicular fashion. I'll drill some pilot holes, and then use a bunch of heavy-duty deck screws for this. Next, I need to attach that piece of strut onto the narrow side of the center 2x4. I'll do this with some pretty substantial lag bolts and washers. So I'll drill some pilot holes for those, and then get those lag bolts started. But now I need to figure out exactly where the hoist's mounting brackets will need to go, because they will be clamped down into place when I tighten down those bolts. So I'll temporarily attach the whole thing to the brackets and mark where the brackets will need to be. Now I can get the hoist back out of there for now and finish tightening down all 8 of those lag bolts. And what I have here is one incredibly solid DIY mounting surface for my hoist. And while it may be difficult to explain exactly how I'm attaching this thing to the roof trusses, I'll give it a shot. The center 2x4 in my DIY bracket is cut for the exact length between 2 trusses, while the outer 2x4 is a little longer. This allows me to position my bracket in between the 2 trusses while having that longer surface to screw through from the top. So I'll start by doing just that. Put a few of those heavy deck screws through the longer 2x4 into the top surface of the truss wood. Then I'll come at it from the sides to put some more screws through the sides of the trusses and into the narrow ends of the middle 2x4 in that bracket. And you might also see 2 small segments of 2x4 on either side of the bracket, which I screwed in place mostly to keep this whole thing from sliding down the trusses while installing it, but I suppose they may add some support to the whole thing as well. Next, I will very carefully attach the hoist to the 2 U-shaped brackets using the included bolts. Of course, doing my best not to drop this 22-pound hunk of steel on my head. Now the installation is complete, and I just need to test it out. But right away, I noticed something was wrong. When I move the cable up or down by itself, it works perfectly. But as soon as I put any resistance or weight on the cable and try to lift it up, the machine shuts off. And I quickly realized why this was happening. This hoist is outfitted with a neat feature that prevents over-tightening. That is, it won't let you raise the cable up so high that the hook and red weighted disc reach all the way to the top while the motor is still trying to turn it and pull it up even more. And this is accomplished with this rectangular shaped metal ring. When the red disc pushes against this rectangular ring, it pivots the ring on a small hinge and presses a button which stops the motor. And this would work perfectly fine if the hoist was mounted on a flat surface, such that the cable hangs straight down within that rectangle. But I've mounted this thing on practically a 45-degree angle, which makes the cable actually lay slightly against the edge of that rectangle. And as soon as there's any weight on that cable, it manages to pivot that switch and trigger the shutoff. So the simplest thing for me to do is simply bypass that rectangular switch and have my cable hang straight down without being inside of the rectangle. That just means I don't get to use this particular feature of the hoist, and I'll just have to always pay attention to how high up I'm raising that cable. But oh well. Anyway, once that little issue has been addressed and everything is working great, there's just one more little thing I want to improve, and that's the hanging control switch. This type of control switch is meant to hang down from the winch unit. The cord is long, but not long enough that I could route this thing across some of the ceiling joists and have it hang down off to the side somewhere. And since I don't want this thing dangling right down in the middle of the garage when not in use, basically right where I park my truck, I need to think of a way to get it out of the way when I don't need it. So I got one of these spring tension counterweight balancer thingies. The idea is that when I want to use the control, I'll pull it straight down, and when I'm done with it, I'll raise it back up. But the one I bought is a pretty cheapo, crappy product, so it doesn't really work as intended. Instead, the spring always has some tension such that the control won't stay down all by itself when I pull it down. Still, I don't mind it much, and it just means I have to hold on to the control while I'm using it. And when I let it go, it goes back up to its storage position. If I really needed this switch to stay down while not touching it, I guess I'd just have to spend more money and buy a better product. Now I consider every part of this installation complete, and it's time to really test it out. Looking around my garage for something that's pretty heavy and weighs at least 100 pounds or so, I quickly noticed my generator sitting there. So using the included straps that came with this hoist, I hooked it up and gave it a try. This hoist lifted that roughly 110-pound generator with ease. The motor didn't struggle in the least to pick it up, and my DIY bracket held strong. And as a happy side effect of this test, it made me realize that this is a perfect way to load this generator onto my truck. This generator is one of the only things that I own that I both need to transport regularly and cannot load or unload by myself. Well, until now, that is. All in all, I'd call this overhead hoist installation a resounding success. It will do exactly what I need it to do, and it's completely out of the way when I don't need it. And if you want to check out this exact hoist system for yourself, I'll put a link to it in the video description below. Be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including future DIY, installation, and product review videos. And consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/Great Lakes Country. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm John, and this is Great Lakes Country.